Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are here with the Responding to a Disclosure series, Lunch and Learn. This has been a collaboration for a variety of sexual assault centers all across Ontario, Canada. So today we are going to be talking about teachers and navigating disclosures for teachers, educators, and everyone involved in the educational sphere. But let's jump in and see who is here today.
Hello, hi, my name is Maddie, and my pronouns are she, they. I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator at SAC Kingston, and we serve the KFLA region.
Hi, my name is Miranda. I'm the Public Education Coordinator at SALSHA, and we serve Hamilton and the surrounding area.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alicia Fisher. Pronouns are fluid, whatever you feel like I am down for. And I work at the Kawartha Sexual Assault Center. We serve the areas of Peterborough, City of Kawartha Lakes, Haliburton, and Northumberland.
Hi, everyone. I go by she, her. My name is Marissa. I'm the Public Education and Volunteer Coordinator at Women's House, and we serve Bruce and Grey counties.
Amazing. So what are we going to be talking about today? So we've done our introductions. We're going to dive right into what is trauma and sexual harm. How can that show up in a disclosure? And then look at how teachers and educators can respond to that disclosure and jump into some teacher-specific trauma-informed resources. So let's start to understand a little bit about trauma, sexual harm, and disclosures. So, of course, we're going to talk about sexual violence. Now, sexual violence is a broad term that describes any kind of violence that can be physical, psychological, emotional, that is carried out through sexual means or by targeting someone's sexuality. Now, I like to look at sexual violence like an umbrella term, encapsulating a lot of different harmful acts that are sexual in nature. So that can vary anything from sexual assault, flashing, sharing sexual photos, sexual harassment, exploitation and trafficking, stalking, ongoing abuse that can be both in the home and in public, and even voyeurism. And sexual violence has persistent forms of gender-based violence that are all rooted in gender inequality. Sexual violence is the only violent crime in Canada that is not declining, and its impact goes way beyond the survivors themselves. It impacts their partners, their family, friends, colleagues, and the wider culture as a whole. Now, when we think about sexual violence and, is this something that is even prevalent? Is it something that we as teachers need to know about? That answer is a 100% yes. Because in Canada, 1 in 3 women, 1 in 6 men, and 1 in 2 trans and non-binary individuals, whoops, spelling mistake, will experience some form of sexual violence in their lifetime. How does that impact young people? 1 in 10 Canadians reported being sexually victimized before they turned 18 years old. 1 in 10. The majority of sexual assault cases of children, the offender was known to the child. And there are strong connections between childhood sexual abuse and mental health problems. And so this is a big problem that we've been seeing with the pandemic as well. Children who feel supported, nurtured, and safe when disclosing abuse have the most successful recovery and future adjustment. So this is why our roles as educators in supporting that disclosure is really important here today.
And we're going to be talking about the difference between a disclosure and a realization, because today we are aiming at having teachers feel more prepared to respond to when a student comes to you to talk about the harm they've experienced. But a disclosure is when someone shares an experience that they recognize as harmful or traumatic. So that could be if a student comes up to you and says, "This happened to me and I didn't feel right. I don't feel good about this. Something was wrong." But a realization is when somebody mentions a situation and they don't recognize that their consent has been violated, or they don't recognize that something happened there that can be harmful and traumatic for that person. So in those situations, we can still use the same tools to support people, but it might take a little extra time and patience because that is the first time that somebody has been able to recognize and to understand that what happened to them was not okay. And when we are preparing to respond to disclosures of trauma of any kind, we have to be able to remember that reactions to trauma can be diverse and sometimes unexpected. I think we often expect that traumatic reactions look like, anger or sadness or very extreme forms of emotions, but there can also be numbness. There could be laughter. People use many different ways to cope about their experiences when they are coming forward. And we have to be prepared to accept that where the person is at is right for them. We don't need to change anybody's emotions, but support them in what is working for them to cope in that moment as they share their experience with you. And we'll talk about some strategies. This is my favorite part of this workshop, talking about how do we actually do it? How do we respond when somebody comes forward and discusses their experiences of trauma and harm? And the method that we use is called Valor. And it's a great way to remember the different aspects that you can use to respond to a disclosure. So the word Valor was created at Sasha so that it can remind us every time that we are responding to a disclosure of sexual violence, that it takes so much courage for a survivor to come forward and to share with us this disclosure. And each of these letters has a very important meaning. So when you're in that moment and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I don't remember anything and how to respond, if you just remember this one word, hopefully it can get you through all of these really amazing tools that you will be learning today. And I do want to start by acknowledging that you already have some of these amazing tools in your toolkit. And one of the biggest tools that everybody needs to be able to start in understanding sexual violence is a willingness to learn. And you've already shown that by being here today and joining with us to learn more. So thank you for that. And I'm excited to share with you the rest of Valor.
So V for Valor, validate. Validating folks' lived experience and their lived realities. It allows the survivor to know that it's okay to feel how they're feeling, to be processing how they're processing, that their emotions are right, they're never too much, they're never too little, that they're not alone, that their experience is not abnormal, and it's validating their lived experience, and it's doing so through your tone, your facial expressions, your body language, through affirmations. You know, it's understandable. And it's these small differences in language that mean so much for a survivor to be heard and to be recognized and acknowledged in their experiences and their reactions to their life and the harm that has happened.
So the A stands for applaud. And applause can be a very important tool in helping a survivor recognize the things that they're doing very well, such as reaching out for support, actively thinking about their situation, working through it, or even the ways that they're surviving their trauma. One thing that works really good as an applause method is to recognize that this was hard for them to have shared with you, but it's really amazing that they've started talking about it. So some vocabulary that you could use might be, it sounds like you've been working hard on this. This was a tough call to make, and I'm glad you did it. Or reaching out is really scary, and I'm very proud of you.
There we go. We talk about, communication is so important with any sort of relationship that we're in, but it's really the listening that is so important. We can do this by providing full attention with our body language, showing indicators of saying, I see, and I can understand that, da 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 da. There are some strategies that you can utilize when listening to someone. And some of those can feel like mirroring, paraphrasing, and some mirroring statements that you can say is, it seems as if you're experiencing this. I hear you saying what they're saying. I'm wondering if this is what your experience is, this is what your experience is. And a supporter may want to ask some questions, but as someone who is listening, you don't need to know the full story. And we do not want students and young people having to continuously repeat the traumatic experience, especially they turn to you and go, I've already told you about this. Why am I repeating this? So we don't need to know the whole story, but really focus on the here and now. How are you feeling? Where would you like to begin? Can be some really great prompts.
And then the O for options. And I really like this. And I love the idea of just sort of having, a Rolodex of options for the folks that you're speaking to, right? And asking open-ended questions, how can I share this space for you? Or how can I share this space with you? And knowing that it's not about giving advice, it's not about solving the survivor's problems, it's about, offering support and prompting them to share what they feel comfortable sharing, and to just keep that Rolodex of options there, open and running for them and available to them whenever they need it and whenever they feel it's right to pursue the options that you provide.
The U stands for utilize. So as teachers, we have tons of resources around us. Connect with community organizations, make referrals outside for support for yourself and the survivor. Know what community options are available, such as your local sexual assault support centers or crisis lines. It may also be very helpful to have brochures inside the classroom or in your guidance counselor's office.
And next is Reframe, the last letter in Valor. So this one is actually a two-part approach. And really the goal of being able to reframe for a survivor is to help show another perspective, because often survivors are struggling to understand why the experience happened to them, why this trauma happened, or what caused the violence to happen. And so often, because of our society, this turns to survivors blaming themselves. And when you are reframing, it's not about telling a survivor that their feelings are wrong or they shouldn't be feeling that way. It's really important to reframe gently and to always start with validation when you're trying to show a survivor another perspective that tells them you are not at fault. And it can be a situation like somebody saying, if the student comes to you and says, I just don't understand why this happened. I can't believe this happened. Why did this happen to me? And you can say something like, it sounds like you're trying to understand why this happened to you. And that's very normal, but always know it was nothing that you did. And it's very normal for folks to be wondering why this happened, and you can be very specific. So maybe somebody's saying, is it because of this? Is it because of that? You can repeat those things back, just like Alicia was saying in that active listening, and say, I hear you saying that you're worried that it was the fact that you went home with this person that caused this, but it's absolutely not your fault. That person made a choice and that didn't have your consent. So reframing is always validation first, and then really gently introducing that alternative perspective that shows the survivor that it is never a survivor's fault. And sorry, my turn. Trauma-informed resources for teachers. So we're going to talk about what does trauma-informed care resources look like. So yeah, next slide.
Perfect. So trauma-informed teacher care, and the first thing that we can do, and I really love this initial strategy, is acknowledging the space, because not only does this acknowledge what your role is, acknowledge what the space is for, but it also doubles as a great grounding strategy. When we're talking about traumatic events in our lives, or maybe just trying to sort out what has happened to us, a lot of folks will experience some form of disassociation where their mind feels like it's wandering off over here, but their body is here, but their body's in another space. So describing what this space is for, whether it's virtual or in person, and what your role is in a really empathetic and caring manner. You can also use this to disclose, as we've heard from various school boards, that disclose any recording devices that may be used and the reason why those are happening. So saying something like, yeah, we're recording this conversation and this is what we're just going to record it, can feel a little bit jarring, but saying that, just so you know, this meeting is being recorded just to ensure your safety, and this way that you may not have to continuously repeat, and we can go back to this if you need, but this is really here for your safety and my safety as well. And then this then shifts into the next form, which is informed practices.
Yes, and informed practices always start with thoroughly understanding your duty to report. Because when you understand your duty to report, you can share that with the student. And giving them that informed consent to understand what your obligations for is so important for that student to feel empowered to tell you, rather than to feel blindsided if there is a situation where you say, yes, I can absolutely keep this confidential, and then you find out you really cannot. So absolutely always start with understanding your duty to report and sharing as much of that information with the student that you're talking to as you can to let them feel empowered in their choices. And it's also about reflecting on the intersections of marginalized identities. recognizing that we have to take an individual approach to supporting students and survivors, that not all students and survivors are coming with the same lived experience. And those who are BIPOC, those who are trans, those who are disabled, those who live in poverty, these are all intersections that we have to be mindful of because it changes what an experience of reporting looks like. It also in our society unfairly changes who is going to receive justice or be credible in a lot of situations. So when we're talking to survivors, we have to be very mindful of these marginalized identities to provide support that is really understanding all aspects of the survivor and not only looking at the experience of trauma, but also these other experiences of oppression and marginalization that contribute to that trauma. And it's always, again, about that word empowerment. I'm going to say it again. Involve the youth in their choices in the process. And I know that Nadia is going to talk about what that can look like in the next section, but it is so important to be able to give this youth as much choice as possible, because we can recognize that even when it's a youth, that there is so much expertise in every survivor to know what is best for them.
Yes, treating survivors as experts of their own lives, involving them in choice and in the process of disclosure is so integral to informed consent and being able to provide appropriate alternative, resources for student support. So different reporting options, right? Self-reporting, other agencies, using risk assessment tools to address possible safety issues for QT BIPOC students, because perhaps pursuing the reporting process as a teacher without providing some of these alternative resources could mean, a drastic change in quality of life for QT BIPOC survivors. It could mean isolation from their community, from their family, from their friends. And so involving them in this process, this informed process of informed consent throughout the disclosure process is just so integral. And letting them know, affirming and coming back to the V, validating support is available without disclosing, and that there's just that Rolodex of options going and that you're there for them.
So we are going to be wrapping this up fairly quickly of our lunch and learn, but here's a couple of resources that might be helpful to you as a teacher. You can review the duty to report policy at the Ontario College of Teachers website. You could also support youth with Kids Help Phone, Scarlet Teen, and by visiting the Sexual Assault Support Center, sexualassaultsupport.ca.
Perfect. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. And the last Tuesday of every month, we're going to be right here with all of you. So today we are talking about teachers, but at the end of September, we're going to be talking about parents, caregivers, and grandparents who are doing a lot of children raising right now. At the end of October, we're going to be talking about friends and friends responding to disclosure. End of November, we're looking to how to navigate even your own triggers when receiving a disclosure. And then at the end of January, we're going to be talking about intimate partners. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. It's been a pleasure being here. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everything. Bye.